I'm Mark Z, and you're watching Thorin, the best interviewer behind Travis Gafford.
Perkz is one of the best Western players in League of Legends history. He has been a defining player for his teams, G2 when he was a mid, Europe as a region with how many times he's been domestically a champion, he's been in the MSI final, he was top 4 at Worlds, as all as a mid before he became the AD carry and was able to win MSI now, win LEC again. But defining and rating him as a player has proven not just very tricky for me myself. I notice in the community, you see like even the other AD carries, like sometimes they give him credit for a performance or they say like he's insane or they say he's amazing in one way, but they're not sure in other ways. And when you're trying to figure out within his team, how essential a part is he? Is he one of the more important parts? Is he a background player? Is he a role player, which seems almost weird for an AD carry, but obviously it can happen at certain times. Hence the infamous Season 5 and on utility AD carries, etc. The problem is, this guy was a monster when he was a mid laner. Like, Caps has a skill peak and a playmaking vision that maybe no other Western mid laner has had. I can't really think of any off the top of my head that matched him in that respect. But you look at someone like Perkz, he was an incredible player and with consistency, and he could put the whole team on his back every game. He was a primary carry of that G2 team, and we hear these stories from all these teammates that have played with him, coaches, etc., about his mind for the game, this cerebral understanding of things, shot calling components he developed over the years, playing with the Mythies of the world, playing with people like Trick as a jungler, who obviously was winning the MVP early in his career. So, problem is, Perkz the AD carry is a different player. He's playing a different role. He's in a totally different team setup. So, he has some similarities, some strengths, some things carry over, but many other things change. I will say, he was expected to potentially be a weakness of G2, and he hasn't at all. So you've got to say that at the very outset immediately. That part is not particularly confusing to try and figure out at all. But normally, when you start looking at a player and trying to evaluate them and how well are they doing their job, you're going to start with them individually. And if you're talking about AD carry, you're going to look at things like laning, like what's his CSing, like how does he play out certain 2v2 matchups, like is he a guy who likes to fight at certain times? Do they play him more defensively? Maybe his support zones them off. Like how can he interact with the jungler? How do they set up for ganks? Or how can they play without junglers? Right, that's all great stuff. But the problem is you do that when you're talking about the best AD carries typically. That's when you're trying to figure out how good is Uzi? Like fucking Teddy, is he really a monster like people say? That's what you do. With Perkz, the problem is, because of the team he's playing in, where he is basically on a super team, I feel as though you've got to set up the rest of the map first before you can even look at him as a player. I mean, there's a reason why I don't say look at the rest of his team, because I want to look at the rest of his team and what they are doing and the impact that's going to have before he even starts hitting a minion, before he ever starts trying to get in a 2v2 fight, before he ever has to worry about, do I have to get out of this lane with a certain amount of CS or up an item or whatever to have a chance in the game to win, which, let's face it, these are scenarios actually he's not even having to think about most of the time, which is why I'm going to set up the rest of the squad. So consider the impact of having these players with you, not just good players, very good players, and then what they're doing and the impact they're having on the overall game within the game. Like how the opponent's thinking of their win condition, how the opponent's looking in terms of what they want to target, what they want to attack, what they want to destroy, what they want to neutralize. So start in the mid lane, because Caps is the player that Perkz brought in to replace himself. So he himself holds him in very, very high regard. He doesn't give up his primary role, a role that Perkz was like a Hall of Fame level player for, to give it up to this guy and go play a different role. So as he might expect, Caps is pretty fucking amazing. He's probably the best Western player in some people's minds. You see some of the MVPs he's won. He's a guy where, I mean, what's crazy is in the current meta, in the current world, and with his current squad in G2, a lot of people would say he's better than elite Koreans, elite Asian players in the world. Like, he's an incredibly good player. I will say, for such an insanely good player, I don't know, even when I think of some of the greatest Asian mids and Korean mid, Chinese mid, very few of them ever had as many laws as he did. Like maybe Dade could vaguely be compared in that respect. He was more like he had slumps overall. Caps, it's like the claps craps thing. He really does just drop off suddenly in the next game, or it just doesn't go well early in the game. In the same game, he would have just dominated if he'd got that early kill on that big outplay. All of a sudden, he's behind, and it's other parts of the map, other aspects that have to make it work. But you know what? When you have a player like Caps with you, well, let's look at some of the things he brings. He's going to do superstar outplays that are ridiculous. He's going to carry the game. He's going to have Very strong champion pool. Certain picks, unbelievable. A lot of things he can play, things you've never even seen him play before. He's got a mentality to carry, to constantly pressure, try and smash his lane, win his lane, beat his opponent, go for the outplay, make things happen, roam, go for it. This guy's got a very, very set mentality, a great one to play with, I could imagine. We hear about shot calling elements. He's very vocal. He's a guy where he's going to do what he wants to do. You're supposed to follow up with him and, hey, come and do this. Oh, we can try this right now. And he's got a vision for playmaking individually and with other people. That seems to be very, very unique, actually, for a Western mid laner. These aren't the sort of players, actually, in general, that League of Legends produce now. Because obviously the Asians are much more coached. They're much more set in their roles. They're playing more the traditional roles in many ways. So, very unique player. I have to say, if I was any player on the map right now, except for mid lane, Caps is the guy I want on my team. Like, he's the guy I'd love to start a franchise with. Yeah, I do think you need other pieces. That's why actually I think pieces like Soaz and Reckless were key pieces to have around a Caps. Actually, Brox, in terms of how he jungles, probably worked fantastically well with Caps, with good reason if you look in that last year together. I think some of those aspects probably cover some of Caps' weaknesses, and then his weaknesses cover theirs, and it offsets and makes it a fucking sick team. That's why that Fnatic team was very, very good and themselves look at the best Western team ever. So then you go and you think, what's the impact of having a player like that? Well, first of all, there's very few teammates could have more impact on a game and on the map than Caps does right now. Absolutely a dream player to play with in some senses if you're an AD carry. He attracts a lot of attention due to this rep. If you know, as a support, as a jungler, even as a fucking top laner at times, this guy's going to be going balls deep on fucking outplays any time in the game. He's going to go for crazy plays. He's going to dive under the guy's tower. He's going to start fights up. He's going to stay in those extended fights even with low health. I'm a jungler. I hear that. I'm going to be lurking around that fucking mid as often as I can. I'm going to be going to that mid as many times as I can. I'm going to tell him the support, let's set up this gank now. No, don't. You don't have to set up something like elaborate one. Just come now. Like, we'll get him now before you. Because the amount of times he's way up in that lane, the amount of times he's in a lane where a tower's being pushed down, he's still way up. That's brilliant bait. Guess what? If I'm playing elsewhere on the map as Wonder, the top laner, or Perks in the AD carry, I'm loving that. This guy's taking pressure off me. This guy's letting me play in the game a lot easier, and I'm already one of the best in theory. So now I can really get ahead, right? Dream player to play with in some respects, right? Still, yes, certainly. Perks could be a very, very good player, but you have to take these things into account. Then you go and you look at that other solo lane. It's a game that at the moment in 2019 has been dominated to some degree by the solo laners, right? Wonder is a player who is the other player people are debating. Who is the best Western player? They're debating between fucking the two solo laners that Perks has on his team. No one's saying Perks is the best Western player. They're debating whether two of his primary threat laning teammates in the other lanes are the best in the entire West. Now, we're starting to talk about in the world because of what they've been able to accomplish at MSI and so on. So for some people, Wonder's the best top laner, best Western player, right? That's what Papa Smithy said. Credible analyst, someone who knows the game for a long time. This guy is a carry top laner. This guy is a pressure player who put pressure on the map, put pressure on the opponents, forces a response out of them. This guy's a guy who's very good in 1v1s, but then he gets involved in the skirmishes if he goes to team fights. That's where he originally made his name when he was playing the likes of Splice. Again, different type of a player to Caps, less ups and downs, more consistent highs. Great champion pool as well, willing to play things for the comp. Another dream. If I'm an AD carry, I love having a carry top lane. I love having a pressure top lane. I love having a top lane that goes for 1v1s and outplays and calls the jungler up. Because that means the other fucking jungler goes up. That means the other jungler goes up to match the gank in a counter gank. That means the other jungler goes up to gank to try and stop him getting ahead. That means the jungler goes up to try and put him behind. That means the jungler goes up to make a pick of his not come on. That's brilliant. Let's draw all the jungle elements away from me. Everyone knows as an AD carry, if you think you are good and you have a good bot lane, and obviously with Mickey X you do, all you want is 2v2. Just get the fuck out of my lane. Or if that's not going to happen, then tell you what, while that jungler goes top to deal with Wonder, tell you what, let's have our jungler come down the bottom. Or let's have someone come to the bottom and let's take a fight there. How many times in League of Legends are they trying to focus on a bot lane fight and then you see in the top lane the two like circles are right over each other. It's like champion that's being killed. You're like, oh, fuck. Even in pro play you miss that shit. It's ridiculous, right? So certainly Perks also helps with him and Caps helps with Wonder. I'll certainly add that in. Don't act like these players are playing individually on the map. They're not. They're all benefiting in this respect. But I look at Perks and I can't give as much of a benefit of the doubt because I've seen these other players play in other teams. I've seen these players be exceptional in teams like G2 with Wonder last year when he didn't have a sick bot lane. I've seen Caps when he had at times questionable play from Whipple, who admittedly was very good and didn't have a hard carry. I've seen a lot of things from these other players that I haven't seen yet from Perks. I've only seen him play with his one team as an AD carry. You then think about it. Wunder and Caps are both teleport players. You'll see them teleport very, very often. They can appear anywhere on the map, including in the bot lane, to get big fights going, to follow up on fights, to get a return kill. That changes completely the lane. You're not just playing in an old school 2v2. You're not playing in like, oh, see how good the support does here. If he's on some off and gets to kill it. That's not happening as much. Or if it does, it then leads to a different element of the game state. Therefore, sometimes actually getting behind, getting picked, a fight starting on you isn't always as much of a negative. That can be turned around to be a positive. That's going to benefit as well if you're a rookie at a position, if you haven't played it that much before, if you're not one of the best in the world, if you haven't played as like a hard carry, etc. It's a different game for you, isn't it? Then you look at Jankos. We haven't even got to Jankos yet. That was third on the fucking list. Godlike early game jungler, a guy who since season 4 has been the heir to Diamond Procs because the way he just goes in, gets those early game action going, gets that first blood, gets a player and a lane going, gets kills on himself and gets beasting, has sick mechanics, fantastic mind for ganking, very, very proactive player, syncs up well with other players. Who the fuck wouldn't want this guy as your jungler? Like, even though personally they didn't get along, it doesn't surprise me at all that Forgiven's best ever results as a player, in terms of as a team, came playing with Jankos. Of course you'd want to pair players like that up. You think any of my favourite players or Westerners I didn't want to see play with Jankos? Doublelift, Forgiven, Froggen. Give me all these guys with Doublelift. That's with Jankos. That's the dream for me. That's he's one of the absolute best players, and his consistency over the years, impeccable. Very, very few splits that were bad. Again, if you're an AD carry, how good your junglers can be very significant for the pressure he puts on the map. If he's ganking, if he's inventing, if he's drawing the attention of the other jungler, back into the other jungler, taking the other jungler elsewhere on the map, that's really, really good for me. And then we'll get to the lane partner of Perkz, Mikyx. This guy, the problem I have is, he's playing with such sick primary carry players. You can't say he's the best player on the team. I think it's hard to make that case, etc., etc. There are times it fucking looks like it. That's what's insane. This guy's mechanics are so incredibly good. I've never seen a Western support anywhere close to the mechanics of this player. And then add in the playmaking. I've seen good Western supports before. I've seen Western supports who could obviously play stuff like Thresh and go for these big plays and look fucking sick at times or control the lane. The way this guy does it, though, like, I have to start looking at the greatest ever Korean supports, the best ever Korean mechanical support players, the Mad Lives, the Matters of the world, before I can even find anything comparable. And then you add in the playmaking component, you add in how many champions he's willing to play and how insane he is on the ones that he's really strong on. Holy shit. I think all needs to be said is this. I've been watching. I feel as though even the elite Asian players get shocked when they actually play official games against Mikyx. Even they're sort of looking like, who the fuck is this guy? Like, yeah, we know Caps is, we know, what's this fucking support player? Well, I bet they go on his Gamepedia like, oh fuck, what, he's playing on Splice? Why is he on their Misfits? Why is he on these teams? Like, what? Not even the Misfits that we remember. That was Ignar. What the fuck? I bet they are baffled that this player seems to have come out of nowhere for them. And then with all these other players, oh my God, it's fucking insane. So again, if I'm an AD carry and a rookie AD carry, give me Mikyx instantly. I'll instantly take him as the player. Sure, you might think, oh, but I'd rather have a Mithi or something. That depends on the rest of your team. That depends on your team's overall understanding, your vision for the game collectively, how you want to play. If you just want a sick playmaker, a guy with insane mechanics, brilliant champion pool so he can sync up with you and the overall comp, then you go and you take him entirely, right? Then finally, before we get into Perkz directly, just consider how many times in the game, because the others do it as well a little bit, Perkz does it a lot, how many times some of the players in G2 will take something that's not even that strong individually for them, or in lane, or in normal set states in the game, but in those skirmishes, as a comp, in 2v2s and 3v3s, in the proper 5v5 teamfight split, has an interesting addition to what it can do to the team, brings some element, some variety to what you can then make happen, or plays you can create, like, for example, him taking teleport at times that you wouldn't see from the hard carry, AD carry, the Uzi of the world, the Teddy, etc. They probably wouldn't do that. They wouldn't even think that way. Now, sure, that's also a knock on some of his teammates. Some of them are getting games they're winning where they're not playing a traditional win. It's harder to evaluate them. Perkz isn't the one doing it the most necessarily. I've seen Wunder do it many, many times. Obviously, he's done it sometimes. He's played himself the Pyke, etc. He's had himself times when he's swapped out of the lane, etc. But you think of it, and that does show that his impact isn't just like the CS, the kills, to get to the team fight, win the team fight. It's not the traditional AD carry. So you look at the impact on Perkz. Insane laning help from Mikyx and his jungler and other players who have shot calling elements themselves. Pressure top, mid and jungle. He isn't played through much in bot. He can just chill some games and still win the game. He can be down in CS some games and win the game. He can get no kills when he doesn't even need to get to a team fight, can win the game. In some senses, he has kind of a Jackie Love-esque situation going on there. I'll address that in a future video or article. I'll break down his role. Teams having like a fucking billion skirmishes. He can get involved in those. Can not get involved depending on what the game is. He takes teleport. Like, this is a guy where you can see all these elements of the team are impacting him and how he plays individually. Because when you look individually, listen, I'll immediately say right out, even to this day, he occasionally mispositions and looks like he played a champion like it was a mid lane champion. Like he thought he was going to dive in, burst them out. He goes too close to people sometimes in a way. He carries some of the greatest AD carries. You think of Uzi, half the time he's going fucking backwards, and he's kiting away from people because everyone's going in on his ass like he's the laser pointer and they're cats, to quote like a classic. I think it was Froscoren or something, was like that line one time when she was doing LPL. You know, he's not doing that as often. And in fact, the fights aren't even good. He isn't playing AD carries as often. They're not playing in a traditional team fight setting at 40 minutes in the game. You know, there's a lot of things it's hard to evaluate him because the game isn't even played that way anymore. And he wouldn't do it anyway because it's not played that way now. So it's hard to evaluate him against the great players, right? I will say, generally, he's exceeded expectations, sometimes drastically. So, I mean, I think MSI playoffs is a pretty obvious example of that. People thought he might be the weak point. The idea he could ever be like a strength at times or play up to and above the level of some of the other people he's facing at an elite international level, that is mental. Like, no one would ever have thought that was even possible. Then you go and you look at his champion pool. This is a massive, massive boon for the guy. He has been good on the meta AD carries. He's had his own carry games occasionally when he's been needed to. He has way more mages and other mix, off-meta picks, weird picks, stuff that isn't even AD carry whatsoever or mid lane than any traditional AD carry player overall. Maybe like some of the other new school people, Patrick, formerly Sheriff, maybe someone like him compares in terms of overall amounts of champions played. But even then, a lot of those are going to be the traditional ones. He's not going to have as many mages. People were bigging up Viper and some of these players last year for what they could do in the bot lane. They aren't even close in terms of how many they can play, how many things that have nothing to do with AD carry that can do things elsewhere on the map. Obviously, the thing about G2 is they sometimes basically forego traditional roles and even concepts of those roles and how you model them together to create something entirely new, not just from one player with one pick, 3 players with 3 picks that totally transform the game, and then you're the ones trying to play catch-up, trying to figure out what fucking game they're playing when you thought you were playing League of Legends. He is a part of that with his champion pool. His champion pool diversity is one of the biggest strengths that G2 has. Once you get out of how good the individual players are, how sick their raw skills are, their playmaking, that adds on just what Perkz brings in that sense a lot entirely. So I give him a lot of props for that entire. Then you add in one of the reasons why he can do so many picks and will is he has a totally different playmaking mentality than other AD carries. Other AD carries are, give me the farm, give me my items, give me a lane to play in where I'm not getting ganked all day long, get me to those team fights or those mid-game skirmishes, and then I will carry the game. That's when I can then take over the game. He isn't doing that. He's getting involved early on. He's given up CS to go and roam and take ridiculous fights. He plays teleport sometimes and TPs in behind people, etc. I mean, I know that one player has sort of broken a lot of our brains, but you've seen him do other things like that ridiculously throughout the time. And you got to add in, you don't really need an AD carry right now. You don't need one to play through necessarily. You don't sometimes literally even need one on the map. Now, will that change? If it changes, will he be worse? If there's somehow a world, somehow in the future, either he doesn't have the same teammates or the meta changes in League of Legends or it goes back to some vision control style, probably not in some areas, right? But let's say it did, and suddenly you have to only play the Sivir, you have to play Ezreal, Lucian. These are like the Caitlyn. These are the only champions that people play in. Jhin, they're the only ones in the bot lane. Would he be as good? Wouldn't that take away some of the side strengths I'm talking about? Some of the extra quality he's bringing with his versatility. With worse teammates, I feel as though it would. In a different manner, I feel as though it would. Like, I feel as though this is harsh to say because he's still developing as a player. It's unfair in some ways to compare him to the greats of all time because he hasn't played as many years. But I also feel as though the team benefits him. The meta seems to benefit him. In many senses, in some ways, he might be at his best now. I'd hope in years to come he will individually develop into the role more and round it out and could one day, I would certainly give him a shot to compete in that kind of a meta and be one of the best still. He has a great mentality for it, very good work ethic as well. But it's hard to evaluate him, especially it's hard to evaluate him in the lane because of the map pressure elsewhere, because of having fucking Mickey X with him, because of his jungler. Think about it, right? But not only does he have a sick jungler, but that means that when the jungler's taking part on the map, he has one of the best to work with him. There's players who have shit tier junglers who are amazing AD carries, and we don't even always factor that in when we think about them individually. There's times where there's the lack of a jungler because of those other laners, because pressure is elsewhere on the map. Think of how many godlike AD carries have played with a fucking farming jungler. I think some of Klaylov's teams. Or you think of having just outright a bad jungler. Go look at Imp when he was in LGD in 2015 and he was making both LPL finals. He won one of them. That guy he had was so fucking bad. It was called like TBQ or something. It was so insanely bad, that guy who was a jungler. And they were winning the LPL. No one was giving him credit for having a shit jungler. Everyone just judges him individually. You look at the pressure on the map, or the lack of pressure, as in no pressure on you, or there's pressure elsewhere. He isn't living the Uzi Eye, forgiven, double lift life that they've had at times in their career. We've never seen anything like that from Perkz in terms of as an AD carry. We've certainly seen it as a mid to some degree. So the problem here is when you're modelling and thinking of the concept for how we think of Perkz, right? I think of Reckless when he had his very best seasons earlier in his career when he was playing with Soaz and Xpeke, and then he had, admittedly, Yellow Star isn't a Mickey X type player, but he had a very good player in terms of mind in his lane to help him. You think of Jackie Love and IG now. The point is, I've always undervalued these players relative to other people because I didn't see them as the most important person, the carry, the person who had to take over the game, someone who had a lot more leeway, I felt, compared to others. They had an amazing map setup compared to some of the people you're comparing them to. So as a result, that immediately does make me sort of think, I'm going to be a little bit more cautious with this person, or I'm not going to overrate certain aspects of them. But you know what? I will say he can be one of the best in the role. Maybe he even is within Europe, within the West. I just don't think, as a result of that model, he's the best because he doesn't have to be. He doesn't consistently need to be the best. He can occasionally do it. Occasionally, he can bring other aspects other than the actual normal role. The other players have to play that role. Doublelift has to be the best AD carry in lane or in a team fight or with the AD carry picks. That's because that's the way his team's set up. That's who he's playing with. He isn't playing with the same types of players that Perkz is in G2, especially not in terms of playmaking and other aspects that they do that have nothing to do with the way everyone else is playing the game. I'm open to the idea, because of how good he's been and how good his team's been, that he certainly could be the best, or he could be one of the best, or he's in the running for it and it's something he can develop into, especially as metas change. Sure, it could hurt him, could also help him. Maybe it shows something more. Maybe you have to play through bot lane, and suddenly we see that he was a godlike carry the whole time and could have been the primary carry. I think you look at the fact that he's on a super team, best Western team gunning for one of the greatest teams in the history of League of Legends. That also means that as things change, he can grow into being one of the absolute best players. Right now, what looks like he's getting carried or someone's giving him help or he has an easier time might end up becoming even more of a platform to shine himself with different champions in the future, a different meta overall. I have to say, I do really, sounds harsh because I'm loving watching him play now. Part of me, for my own purposes of evaluating, I kind of want to see him with weaker players as an AD carry. I kind of want to see him maybe with a different support or without a pressure top laner, a guy who plays tanks, or a mid laner who's good but just holds mid and plays a mid and gets the farm. I'd like to see what he would do then, how he would shine, if he'd play differently, if he'd be the same type of player and it'd just be a lot more flawed in the same way as like someone like Ning, when he gets behind, still does the same shit and just looks like an idiot, but when he's ahead looks like a fucking god and knows everything about the game and early game macro. Oh, what am I doing? I'm pressure everything. Like, that's the problem. It's so hard to evaluate these things, especially because people, if you notice, as I point out there, tend to go so hard on it. They take these small things and they just run away with it and draw insane conclusions and project it out completely. So I will say, he's massively exceeded expectations. He's impressed me a lot. He's done things I never even thought of in terms of AD carrying the role. His playmaking, his vision is ridiculous. His shot calling components for a guy who knew at the role. This is bonkers stuff setting up players. It's already insane what he's done, especially because he hasn't been shy. He hasn't chilled back in the way at times I thought like the Recklesses of the world, like I was referring to earlier, have. He seems to have been very, very involved with stuff and with all the other players and bringing them together and setting up the game style and empowering them to do what they're going to do, and then himself getting involved in a way that actually you probably wouldn't have expected for someone role swapping and then being forced to play under such a microscope and such scrutiny as MSI and at the top of his region, etc., not being given a chance to develop. So absolutely insane stuff, but tricky to figure out, right? How do you unravel the Perkz riddle? This video was kindly supported by Dean Tangless, Butt Pounder 420, Andreas Snazon Westerland, Wendell Full, Ho Chi Mao, J Dubs, Alexander Rao, Blunt Smoking Anus Destroyer, Daniel Oliver, Nate DOGG, Ollie J, Tobias Bernasconi, and a special thanks go out to Jerky's Minion and Wish. Would you like to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Maybe you'd like to ask me a question in my monthly AMA.
Do you want teasers for my upcoming content? See who the guests are. Maybe you'd like to take part in a donator discussion with me on video. Well, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today at link in the description box below.